Last fall, I attended an inspiring conference on human rights. And we at Acton certainly emphasize the right of economic initiative and economic freedom, but these presuppose some more basic human rights: freedom of association, religious liberty, free speech, due process under the rule of law, among others. Growing up as I have in America, and as many of you here and in other countries that have such freedoms protected, we have the luxury to think about higher freedoms, as it were, and economic liberty. But there are some here from countries where even the most basic of freedoms can never be taken for granted. And tonight I'm honored to introduce to you our speaker, who is a symbol for us of the importance of individual liberty, the protection of human dignity, and religious liberty. When I heard her speak at the aforementioned Human Rights Conference, I immediately followed her and asked her if she would share her story with Acton University. Our speaker is Marina Nemat. She was born in 1965 in Tehran, Iran. After the Islamic Revolution of 1979, she was arrested at the age of 16 and imprisoned for more than 2 years. In prison, she was tortured and came very close to execution. She came to Canada in 1991 and has called it her home ever since. Her memoir of her life in Iran, Prisoner of Tehran, was published in Canada by Penguin Books and has been an international bestseller and republished in more than 28 countries. In 2007, Marina received the inaugural Human Dignity Award from the European Parliament. And in 2008, she received the prestigious Grinzane Award in Italy. In 2008-2009, she was Aurea Fellow at the University of Toronto's Massey College, where she wrote her second book, After Tehran, A Life Reclaimed, which was published by Penguin Canada in 2010. Please join me in welcoming Marina Nemat.
Hello, everybody. Good evening. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight. Please allow me to express my gratitude to Acton Institute, especially to Chris, of course, who decided to get me here, and to my cook, because of all the hard work of logistics and, tracking me all over the world and making sure I received the emails and they didn't fall through the cracks like socks in the dryer. Anyhow, thank you so much, Mike, for all of your patience and making sure that I arrived here on time and safe and sound and had a good night's sleep. I appreciate that very much. I was actually just in Geneva and I spoke. They gave me 3 2-minute slots, which was bizarre, but at the UN Human Rights Council, and I do invite you to go online on my Facebook page and take a look at the videos. The Iranian officials were looking at me very strangely and very angrily, for that matter, as I spoke. So let me just jump right in, because I have a lot of ground to cover. I was born in 1965 in Tehran, Iran, and back then Iran was not an Islamic republic. We had a king and we called him the Shah. Growing up in Iran, I am a Christian. My grandmothers, they had escaped the Russian Revolution, the 1917 Communist Revolution, and they ended up in Iran. And when I was growing up, during the time of the Shah, Iran was, and actually still is, 98 to 99% Muslim. And the remainder are Baha'i, Christian, Zoroastrian, and Jewish. So I was a member of a very small community of Christians. I converted to Catholicism when I was about 14 or 15. Now, growing up, my father was a ballroom dancing instructor. Oh yeah, ballroom dancing in Tehran. I know that's bizarre. And my mother was a hairdresser, and we lived in downtown Tehran, very busy intersection, and we rented two apartments. So in one of them, my dad had his dancing lessons, and the other, my mom had her beauty salon. So I literally grew up between the sounds of the cha-cha and the tango and women with really big poofy hair. And when I look out of my window, I saw a 4-lane street with a lot of cars, beautiful shops, skyscrapers, people going about doing what people do downtown, going to work, doing shopping, and more than 90% of the people I saw on my street, the women, they wore tight t-shirts and miniskirts. This was the 70s, and the miniskirt was in. I call that the power of the miniskirt. And they love to look pretty. They love to be out there. And at the time, Iran was governed by secular laws. And these laws allowed a woman to become whatever she wanted to be. Women were allowed to become judges. Women were allowed to become the prime minister if they wanted to. Iran was and is a very educated country. Actually, today, more women graduate from universities in Iran than men do. And back then, it was the same. Women were becoming very educated. And the road was clear. Schools were free in Iran. Elementary school, high school, university were free. And you just had to pass the entrance exam to get into university. If you were a good student, that was not a problem. And then you could be whatever. I was a good student, and I had high hopes. We owned a cottage by the Caspian Sea. And now I live in Canada. I appreciate it even more, because it's nothing like Ontario lakes. It's warm, like a bathtub in the summer, miles of sandy beaches as far as the eye can see. And the last summer before the revolution, so we are talking 1978 here, I would get together with my friends on the beach. I had just turned 13. I had a green bikini with white polka dots, and boys and girls together, we would take our boom boxes to the beach. Now, I speak mostly for high school students and university, and when I say boom box, they give me a blank look. And I have to explain big boxes to 20D size batteries weigh 40 pounds. So we would take it to the beach, and we would put on the Bee Gees and be dancing on the beach until the wee hours of the morning. Probably we're doing stuff we were not supposed to do. My parents never knew where I was because it was a very safe place, and we were out there all the time. Every Thursday night, we watched the Donnie and Marie Osmond show, and every Friday night, we watched the Little House on the Prairie dubbed into Farsi. Still my favorite show. I had made all of my plans. I was going to graduate high school, go to university, marry Donnie Osmond, and live happily ever after. Unfortunately, it didn't work that way. And in my spare time, when I wasn't hanging out with boys and being on the beach, I was reading Jane Austen, C.S. Lewis, and Ernest Hemingway alongside Persian poetry, and a little bit of Russian poetry because that was my first language. And then in 1978, we got back from the cottage, and in my beautiful, normal neighborhood, there was a tank parked at my door. I had never seen a tank before. I asked my mother, what's that? She said, it's a tank. I said, oh, cool. Are they shooting a movie? She said, no, I think it's real. And it was real. I watched from my window in downtown Tehran on Shah Avenue as the Islamic Revolution of 1979 unfolded. The street would fill with millions, and I mean it when I say millions, with millions of people yelling various slogans, including death to America, death to Israel, death to the Soviet Union, death to communism, death to the East, death to the West, death to everybody, basically. And looking at them at the age of 13, having lived, I don't know what is normal, but I guess a relatively normal life, I couldn't understand where this anger was coming from. Why were these people so angry? I had grown up in a country which I believed loved to party and knew how to have a really good time. And now, what was this anger? Why were they wishing death to the Shah? Why were they asking for him to leave the country? Why were they asking for this Ayatollah, whatever, to come to you. Who was this Ayatollah guy? And what did Ayatollah even mean? I mean, I had no idea. So I went to a friend of mine, he was 18, he was a university student. I asked him what's going on. He said, well, where have you been? I mean, we have a revolution. I asked, what for? He said, well, the Shah is a dictator. I asked, what's a dictator? And he said, well, if you speak against the government, you're going to be arrested, tortured, and even executed. I said, oh, serious? He said, yeah, it's true. So I watched with interest. Of course, my family being Christian, and those who were religious minorities. I mean, think about it. We were such a small group. And when the Ayatollah began to speak about an Islamic Republic, our natural reaction was, oh, okay, how do we fit in that one? Up to that point, we had never had any problems being a religious minority in Iran. I had Baha'i friends, Zoroastrian friends, Muslim friends. Actually, the majority of my friends were Muslim, and it had never, ever, in any way been an issue. But now, an Islamic Republic? What do you mean, an Islamic Republic? Some Baha'i live the country, some Jews live the country, but Christians, I mean, we had lived there for generations, some of us, and we had always been welcomed, we had always been loved, we had always been known as good people. So why would we leave? I mean, we have nothing to hide, we have nothing to be scared of. So we stayed. The revolution succeeded. This Ayatollah, a religious leader turned very political, had promised the people of Iran freedom and democracy in the form of an Islamic Republic. Now, I asked my friend, what is an Islamic Republic? And they say, you ask so many questions. I mean, it's going to be great. It's going to be democratic. You know, the Ayatollah is going to come. We're going to get rid of the Shah. It's going to be fantastic. You ask too many questions. Okay. Well, the Shah was ousted. Ayatollah Khomeini had been in exile. He returned to the country, and an Islamic Republic was announced through a free referendum. I was there. It was free. 98% voted yes to an Islamic Republic, but if you ask them what it was, they had no clue. It was brand new. It was a brand new idea, and the people of Iran were extremely idealistic. And please, let's not forget that there has never been a revolution in the history of mankind where people get onto the street and say, we want a horrible dictatorship. No. People want freedom and democracy. That's what they want. That's what they are wanting in Egypt right now. That's what they are wanting in Tunisia. That is what they are wanting in Bahrain. That's what they are wanting in Libya. That's what they are wanting in Turkey. In Syria, of course. But is that what they are going to get? Well, if we study the history of revolutions, we understand that the answer to this question is not necessarily. Well, why? Because there are always political powers hiding in the shadows. A revolution is like a tsunami with a great deal of energy, and this energy is very difficult to contain. And these political powers, if they are at the right place at the right time, they can steer this power into the direction that they wish it to go, not necessarily the people. And this is not necessary to the people's best interest. But when you're so excited and so optimistic, and when you have so much adrenaline in your system, you're not going to sit down and think about it logically. You're going to believe any lie that they tell you. And that was the case in Iran. We believed it. So the schools had been shut down for about 3 months. I was in the 8th grade. They reopened, and we went back to school. The school was standing. The classes were there. Our maths and sciences and English and literature and history, geography, everything was there. And it was great to be back because imagine cut off from the world for 3 months, too much violence, and back then there was no Facebook and internet, so I was bored out of my wits. It was great to see my friends and catch up with the stories of a revolution. I mean, it was so exciting to talk about justice and freedom and democracy and equality and all these beautiful words at the age of 13. Well, the school was there, the classes were there, but the principal wasn't. And our principal, Mrs. Farhan, God rest her soul, she was a short woman with a lot of presence, and she really believed, like, even now, you know, she always corrected you if you did something that could in any way be offensive to anybody. And even now, I sometimes remember the lessons that she taught. I can hear her in the background saying, Marina, you should think about that twice. Maybe there's a better way to do that. Maybe there's a better way to say that. So I thank her for that, for all the education she gave me. It's appreciated. She wasn't there. They had sent us a new principal. She was 18, and she was a member of the newly formed Revolutionary Guard, the police of the revolution who are running Iran today, actually. They are really the boss. Back then, they were brand new, and this 18-year-old didn't have a high school diploma. She was there to implement the Iranian cultural revolution. Every ideological revolution has a cultural revolution following it, which is usually bloodier than the revolution itself. Of course, we didn't know that. So we asked the new principal, where's the principal? And she said she was executed. Really? Executed? What for? Well, because she was the best friend of the Minister of Education. Oh, so if you're the best friend of some minister, you're going to be executed? Yep, pretty much. What do you think is happening in Libya and in Egypt and in Tunisia right now? Do you think they're all nice and happy? Do you think it's all democracy now? No, democracy is not an event. It is a process, and usually a bloody one and a violent one for that matter, and usually costly and usually very time-consuming. So let's not hold our breaths, but we can work toward making things better for sure if we learn from the lessons that history has taught us, including the Iranian Revolution that coined the new political Islam. So at the beginning, it was great. I mean, imagine all the old laws are out the window, a revolution just happened, and all the new laws are being written, and it takes time to write a brand new constitution. So for about 6 months, a year, it's absolutely anything goes. And if you're 13 and there are no laws, it's the best thing that ever happened to you. So we were partying, we were reading, we were discussing, we were demonstrating, we were doing all these exciting things, and suddenly, I was 13, and I was a devout Christian. Suddenly, all of my friends, just overnight, they were Marxists. They were all wearing red t-shirts and torn jeans, and they were coming to school with the books of Marx and Lenin under each arm, and they were talking about making the world a better place. And it was fascinating. I'm originally Russian. I had never heard the words Marx and Lenin ever, because they had been illegal. And now they were legal. So imagine something was illegal, now it's legal. All the teenagers, they wanted to do what was illegal, and that was Marx. So all of the older students, all of my friends, all of the cool kids, they were reading Marx and Lenin. And of course, no matter how devout you are, you want to be cool. So I was attending the reading sessions, actually some of the best education I got, because now if somebody asks me, why aren't you a Marxist, I know exactly what to say. Anyhow, so I was hanging out with them, and they were actually wonderful kids. They were lovely. They really believed that they could make the world a better place with all of their might. And they were kind, and they were, I don't know, I just don't have enough good things to say about them. And then things began to change, as they do. Now I have to give you a footnote here. Horror in history doesn't happen overnight. It's not that you go to bed tonight and tomorrow you have Hitler, Stalin, Mao, Khomeini, or the likes of them on your hands. It happens little by little. Liberties that we take for granted. I mean, we have always lived with them. We don't even really notice them anymore. They disappear slowly and one by one. But they go off like little sparks, and the average citizen, like my parents, we were busy going to work, paying mortgages, car payments, arguing with our teenagers. And the average citizen doesn't notice these danger signs, and then they accumulate. And by the time you realize that something is seriously wrong, it's too late, because at this point, if you speak, somebody would put a gun to your head and pull the trigger. And that happened in Iran. Let's not forget that Hitler did not happen in the Middle East. Hitler happened in Germany, a country that had a democratic process in place. So my dear fellow Westerners, if you think that our democracy is going to protect us, please think again. That is not usually the case. We need to be very vigilant, and we need to be paying attention to what's going on. And I think what allows horror to happen Yeah, it was Hitler's fault for sure, and the Nazis and all of that, but it is also the silent majority. Silence is a weapon of mass destruction. If we see something is wrong, something is morally wrong, when we see Jews being shipped to concentration camps, when we see mass executions, when we see torture, when we see injustice, if you just stand by and say, oh, well, it's not a big deal, then we are in trouble. And then we are allowing evil, we are allowing horror to happen. And we should assume responsibility. In Iran, things began to go downhill quickly. Not only we didn't gain any political freedoms, but we lost our personal ones. Dancing became illegal, singing illegal, holding your boyfriend's hand in public illegal. One day I looked around me and having fun had become illegal. You're 14, having fun just became illegal. What are you going to do? Protest. Now, if fun became illegal today in Canada, which is where I live, I'm 48. Do I look like I'm having fun? I wouldn't care. But my children who are 20 and 24, they are going to be on the streets protesting, I can tell. So in Iran, it wasn't my mom and dad who went protesting after all of these things became illegal. It was my friends and I who were on the streets of Tehran every day. And I'm sure you heard about the American hostages in Iran. That movie Argo was just made about it. Well, when those Americans were taken hostage, they were released, all of them survived. At the same time, my generation, thousands of us, I was there. We were on the streets of Tehran protesting the hostage taking, protesting the taking away of our rights and freedoms, protesting to Ayatollah Khomeini and the Islamic Republic. But the world didn't hear about it because all foreign journalists had been expelled and there was no Facebook. And the world was paying attention only to the American hostages because they were more human than everybody else. And at the time, we were being shot at on the streets of Tehran. When we were going to protest, you always had to wear comfortable running shoes and blue jeans and make sure you don't wear anything bright. Because once the Revolutionary Guard showed up and the tear gas started exploding and the bullets started flying, you better run. And you better know the neighborhood, because I don't know if you have experienced tear gas, but when it goes off, you can't see anything. So you're running blind. You better know the neighborhood, you better know where to hide, you better know who to trust and who not to trust. A lot of people died during those demonstrations. I was there, I saw it. But if you got home, adrenaline is pushing through your system like there's no tomorrow. You're literally on high on adrenaline. You're 15 years old and you're thinking, my goodness, that was fun. It was like being on James Bond. I'm gonna go again tomorrow. You're invincible. You're 15. The wave of arrest of young people in Iran began in 1981. The first girl who was arrested from my class, her name was Shahnoush Behzadi. Shahnoush was a sweetheart. We had been friends since the 3rd grade. She was afraid of spiders. I was afraid of cockroaches. We worked on math every morning together because we were not good in math. And we would go to school early and work on it together. If a spider showed up, I took care of it. And if a cockroach showed up, she did. We protected each other. We had this pact between us. And one day she wasn't there to work on math. So I asked around and I figured out that she had been arrested together with her mother and her boyfriend. Oh, I'm sorry, her brother and her mother, not her boyfriend, at home. So that's an interesting background music, but I'm gonna go along in my dad's spirit. He would be happy to hear it. So anyhow, she had been arrested at home, and I couldn't understand why. Why would they even arrest Shahnoush? She wasn't even political, she wasn't even a troublemaker, why? But nobody had an answer for that question. So every day you would go to school and there would be a desk empty, there would be people missing, and we would look at each other and we would say, well, no big deal. I mean, this girl or that girl is 15. What are they going to do to her? They're going to ask a few questions and then you're going to let her go, right? No, wrong. But we didn't know that. So we just shrugged and said, well, how bad can it get? There aren't so many stupid questions in this world, but this one is stupid. How bad can it get? It can get bad, and it can get bad really quickly. They came for me on January 15th, 1982. I was about to take a bath. It was 9, 10 o'clock at night. I went in the bathroom, I turned on the water, and then I heard the doorbell. It was late. Nobody came to our house at that time. My mother called my name. I opened the bathroom door, and there were 2 guns pointed in my face. People have asked me, were you scared? No, I wasn't. And that is not because I'm brave. I'm not brave at all. But I entered a state of shock. A state of shock is a gift from God. It goes on automatically. It's like body armor. It clicks. But it doesn't protect you against bullets. It protects you against emotion. So I was looking at the guns, and it just didn't sink in. My mom and dad were crying, and I was looking at them, and I was thinking, why are you crying? No big deal. I'm just getting arrested. So the guards put me in a car, and they drove me north to Evin prison. As we are speaking right now, Evin prison has about 2,000 prisoners. So this is not a thing of the past at all. What I'm telling you is not history. It is present tense. So I was taken inside the prison, a huge compound in north of Tehran. It has tall brick walls and barbed wire surrounding it, and a lot of armed guards. So I was taken in, blindfolded, along hallway after hallway after hallway. I couldn't see a whole lot, but I could see a little, and I could see that there were a lot of people sitting on the floor all around me, and they were waiting for something. So I was told to sit down. I did. Eventually, somebody came and called my name, and I was taken for interrogation. In the interrogation room, I was 16. A man was questioning me. I couldn't see him, but I could hear him. He asked me, have you attended protest rallies against the government? I said, yeah. It wasn't some state secret. Everybody knew I attended protest rallies. My friends knew I attended protest rallies. The teachers knew I attended protest rallies. The shopkeepers knew I attended protest rallies. What's the big deal? He asked me, have you written articles against the government? I said, yes, I have written articles against the government in my school newspaper. What's the big deal? And then he asked me, where's Shahrzad? Shahrzad is a girl's name. I had met with her once. She was a member of a Marxist group. She had asked me to join them. She was a friend of a friend. She came to my school after the bell rang one day, and we walked to my house together. And I said no to her, because by then I had figured out that Catholic and Marxist don't exactly go together. So I said no to her. She was very civil. She went her way, and I went mine. Apparently, we were both being watched, and she had escaped, and I was caught. So they asked, where's Shahrzad? I said, I don't know, which was the absolute truth. If I knew where she was, I had no reason not to tell. I mean, I was just a naive 16-year-old. They were asking me questions, and I was answering them truthfully. I had no reason to lie. I had nothing to hide. So they took me to another room, and there they took off my blindfold. I was in a small room with 2 men, Ali and Hamid. They handcuffed me, and when they handcuffed me, they realized my hands are going to slide out of the cuffs. I was 95 pounds. So they put both of my wrists together, and as it clicked, my right wrist cracked. And the torture had not even begun. At that moment, I was so terrified that if the devil appeared and told me, Marina, sell me your soul, I would get you home to your mom. I would have sold my soul with whipped cream on top. I would have done anything to get out of that room. And that was, on its own, a devastation next to the pain. Because I was a Catholic, I had grown up with the stories of saints. I had read about people being thrown in front of lions, people being crucified upside down or right side up, people being beaten to a pulp, and to me, I realized it had all been fiction. It was like reading Jane Austen. I mean, that kind of thing. It didn't happen. Maybe it did happen once upon a time. It doesn't happen anymore. It makes it so convenient. This doesn't happen anymore. And now I was in this room with these two men, and I realized I'm no saint material at all. And they tied me to the bare wooden bed. I was lying down on my stomach. They took off my socks and my shoes, and they lashed the soles of my feet with a length of cable about 1 inch thick and rubber. And it's not hollow, it's not like a hose, it's thick, full rubber. And these are grown men, and they are not kidding. Those who use torture will tell you that it is designed to get information. They lie. Torture is designed to break the human soul. They are trying to break your soul. And not only your soul, but the soul of your mother, the soul of your father, the soul of your wife and your husband and your children and your community and the world. That is what they are trying to do. So they beat me and beat me and beat me, and they wouldn't even give me breathing room. They didn't even ask me questions anymore. They just beat. I can hardly describe that space. It is a place of distilled, pure pain. You're reduced to something you don't recognize. You forget to think, you forget who you are, you forget your name, you forget your mother, you forget God. Everything vanished. I was just drowning in pain, and I was absolutely desperate to get out. But it was not an option. So eventually they stopped, and they made me sit up, and I looked at my feet, and I laughed my head off. My feet looked like overgrown party balloons, color indigo, blue toes on them. I couldn't believe my eyes. Then they make you walk, then they beat you again, then they make you walk, then they beat you again. Staggered. Why stagger? Because if they don't and they keep beating you, your skin would break and you would die from bleeding and infection. They are not trying to kill you. There are more economical ways to kill people, including execution. This is hard work. Torture is hard work. And the point is not to kill you. The point is not to get information out of you. The point is to destroy you. I was given a death sentence. A death sentence is really easy to get in Evin prison. Thousands of prisoners entering a prison built for a few hundred. What do? They have mass executions. They start killing. My death sentence, and by the way, a courtroom in Evin is a Sharia judge sitting behind the desk passing verdicts every 5 minutes, not even. There's no lawyer, there's no jury. It's just like a game, like the roll of the dice. My death sentence was reduced to life in prison, I guess. That's what I was told. And I was sent to the cell block with hundreds, thousands of other girls. I was in cell block 246, L-shaped hallway, upstairs, 6 cells on either side of the hallway. The very first night I woke up, I was in a cell. During the time of the Shah, it had 5 prisoners. Now it had 60. So you can imagine when you put so many people in a small space, there are problems. I woke up at 2 a.m. and I needed to go to the bathroom to pee. I sat up in my spot and I looked around me and I realized it was impossible. There were people sleeping all around me like sardines. There was no space between them to put my foot down if I wanted to go to the bathroom, which was down the hallway. So I had to cross the cell, cross the hallway, get to the one bathroom for 300 people. I couldn't go. These were my friends and they were all bloody and swollen. I was not going to walk on my friends. So I waited for dawn. Before dawn, there's the call for prayer, and everybody has to get up, they're alive. And the call came. But then I was number 302 in the bathroom line. Okay, so you wait, because everybody's in the same boat. Nobody has priority over anybody. Now at airports, when there are 20 people in line, I never complain. I can hold it. So I stood there waiting, and as we were waiting, there are names being announced over the loudspeaker. So and so and so and so come to the office. 90% of us are under the age of 20, high school in hell. The people whose names are called are going to be taken for torture, interrogation, and maybe execution. If your name is called, go nicely, because if you don't, they're going to come and shoot you, or first beat you and then shoot you right here. So you go because your chances are better if you go nicely. Those people go, we stay. Now, as we are standing there all day, what are we doing? It's high school in hell. We are girls. We do what girls do best. We talk. About what? About social justice? No, that didn't end well. We talked about everything that makes you human. I had never considered it. I didn't know what made me human. I had no clue. Then I'm standing in bathroom line in this hell, somewhere between life and death. The only thing that existed and was real was the past. So we talked about mom and dad, about family reunions, birthday parties, cupcakes, Donya and Mary Osmond, the Caspian Sea. What makes you human is the memory of the people you love and the fact that people love you despite all evidence. Because the evidence was that the world didn't give a damn. But we decided to hope, and we shared our hope with one another. The fact that I'm standing here in front of you. Do you remember my friend Shahnoush, who was afraid of spiders? She was executed at the age of 15 before I was even arrested. When I got to Evin prison, she was already dead. The fact that I stand here today is because of my friends, the ones who told me their stories and gave me hope. Without them, I wouldn't be here. They gave me love and they gave me hope in an impossible place. And I carry the memory of every girl who ever stood in the bathroom line with me. The girl I was before Evin died somewhere along the way. The person I have become is a witness, no more, no less. I live to testify. My life is about what I have to do, which is to make sure that they are known and remembered and honored because they deserve it. There was another form of torture in Evin. Sometimes girls were called at midnight for interrogation. They would return to the cell block at 5 a.m. with no visible torture signs. If you knew the girl, you would go up to her and you would say, hey, where were you last night? And she would give you some lame excuse. Like, they took me for interrogation, nothing happened. Yeah, right. That doesn't happen around here. And then she would give you that look that said, get lost, don't want to talk about it. Okay. So I was called about 5 months after my arrest. My interrogator, Ali, was there. He looked at me straight in the eye and said, listen and listen carefully. You had a death sentence. Now it's reduced to life. You're going to be here forever. Nobody cares. Yeah, I knew that much. And then he said, you have to become my wife or I will arrest your mom and your dad and your boyfriend. I thought about it. Uh-oh. I knew that they arrested family members because of you sometimes. It was a form of torture. So I made my decision. I said, fine. He said, oh, okay, you have to convert to Islam as well. I said, fine. He said, I'm going to change your name. I said, fine. One day I looked around me. I had lost my friends, my family, my freedom, my religion, and my dignity. He made me marry him. In Evin prison, I was still a prisoner. I asked to go to solitary confinement. Why? Nobody in their sane mind would ask to go to solitary, I know. But I couldn't face my friends. What would I do? Sit with my friends over a bowl of soup and they would say, where were you last night? And I would say, oh, I slept with my interrogator. I don't think so. So I asked to go to solitary, 209 section. So basically every day was 3,000 years. I was being raped over and over every night. And during the day, I tried to sleep as much as I could because it was my only escape. But then you can sleep so much, right? So I would have a lot of time on my hands. And considering the circumstances, I really badly needed to talk to somebody, but there was really nobody to talk to. So I decided to have conversations with God. I mean, God is everywhere, right? So it started something like, hey, God, how are you? Well, you're probably doing better than me because, it's pretty nasty here. I'm sure you know. You're aware. And then, of course, there wouldn't be any burning bush or anything. So, I basically would make it up as I went. And I would be very honest with God. So I said to him, you know what, I should probably be very mad at you for the fact that you threw me in this hellhole. But you know what, I don't think I can, because it's not fair. Because, you know what, Christ, you were treated kind of the same way I'm being treated, probably worse. And then I would say, you know what, I'm not quite even sure if I'm on death row or off death row, because you never know around here. Things go weird. But if they want to execute me, how do you think I should die? Do you think being shot is better, or hanged, or stoned, or crucified? And then I would pause and think and say, oh, you know what? I'm going to go with being shot because it's probably less painful. But then hanged is not too bad. And then after that, stoned. And you know what? Crucifixion, no thank you very much. And all of this made me realize that, you know what? He gets it. He was here. He is here. You know, I remember that hymn that we used to sing at church, "Were You There When They Crucified the Lord?" And I would sing it to myself. And then I thought, oh, you know what, there's really something wrong with this hymn. I never noticed it before, but there's something really wrong with it. It should be in present tense. I mean, why does it say, were you there? No, it should be, are you there? So whenever now we sing it in church, I'm always in present tense, unlike everybody else. But I knew that Christ was with me. And I knew that he was walking with me. Not that it made it pleasant, but I said to him, I said, promise me, please promise me that you would get me out of here, dead or alive, I don't care, but get me out of here, please. The man that I was forced to marry, he took me on short leaves of absence to visit his family. And I expected his mom to be the evil mother from Cinderella and torment me more, but this little woman opened the door, took me in her kitchen with a lot of enthusiasm, and a load of food landed on the table in front of me, and she said, I beg you, eat. And she fussed, and she cared, and she was kind, and she was generous. And I was looking at her, and I was thinking, whoa, what are you? I mean, you're kind and human and generous, and your son is a torturer. How can that happen? How can a normal, good woman have a son who's a torturer? And she kept on talking. And she said to me very casually that my husband, the torturer, had been a political prisoner during the time of the Shah in Evin prison and had been tortured severely, much more than I had been. Up to that point, I was good, he was evil. Didn't take a rocket scientist, I was the tortured, he was the torturer. Now, I was finding out that he had been a victim, just like me, and I didn't like the part that said, just like me, because that meant that he was human, just like me, and I didn't like that. And I thought about it again. We are in solitary confinement, and I thought, oh dear God, that is weird. I mean, so if you're a victim today, you can be the torturer tomorrow, and then if you're the torturer, you can be the victim. I mean, it's like the chicken or the egg. Which one came first? And then the victim becomes the torturer, and the torturer the victim, and the victim the... I mean, it's just dizzying. And why? Well, because the tables turn, and then someday somebody came to him and said, there you go, a length of cable, go get your justice. Well, it's really revenge, but let's not go there. And go and get your justice, revenge, whatever you want to call it, and go ahead. And he was angry and full of hate, and rightfully so, and he did it, and he justified it because he was protecting God and religion and national security and this and that, and it was all justified, it was all fine, and I was the enemy. And I thought, oh, the tables will turn for me. And one day somebody will put a length of cable in my hand and say, go for it. And I still believe it. One day in free Iran, they would come to me and say, do you want to be the Minister of Justice? Well, it's really Minister of Revenge, but you know what, the pay is really good. And you're qualified because you must be really angry. And I thought, you know what? Thank you, but no thank you. Because if I pick up that length of cable, I might as well put a gun to Shahnusha's head and pull the trigger over and over again. The monster of violence is a dragon, in my mind. There's one way is to pull a sword and stick it right in the heart with all of your might. But you know what will happen then? You will turn into one of his heads. Then good luck to you. getting out of that mess. The man that I was forced to marry was assassinated 6 months after our marriage by a rival faction of the government, and his family fought for my release. I went home in 1984, March 26th. Went home, I was just shy of 19 years, had been in prison for more than 2 years, sat at the dinner table with my parents, and they talked about the weather. Nobody wanted to know. Nobody wanted to know at all. Nobody dared want to know. So here we are. Am I angry? Not really. I'm not angry. I don't feel anger. I have felt anger, but I'm kind of over that. I did have my screaming fits and everything eventually. I did have my nervous breakdowns and everything, and I still have them every once in a while. I don't hide that. I suffer from PTSD, but that's all okay. I decided to forgive. The main reason for that is because I want to be free. If I don't forgive, I will be in prison of my anger and darkness and hatred forever. And I don't want that. In order to be able to bear witness for my friends and for all who died unjustly, I need to be free. I need to be making this decision because I want to, out of love, not out of hatred. Because hatred is not capable to carry what I feel. What I feel is much bigger than hatred. What I feel is much bigger than fear. I was just praying a few days ago, and I guess my relationship with Christ is much closer than my relationship has ever been with Virgin Mary. With Mary, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's political prisoner to political prisoner, right? So, with Christ, it's always been, we are kind of buddies. So, he gets it, I get it, been there, done that. So it's all good. I feel comfortable in that realm. And I know that he forgives me for everything, for all the, I made big messes, and, I basically betrayed everybody. But he's used to that because, let's think about everybody, his disciples. Let's think about Peter. What did Peter do? And I never had understood why would Jesus choose Peter to lead his church. He had that other one, John, whom he loved very much. Why Peter? Why a traitor? And then when I became a traitor myself, I realized that when you become a traitor, you're reduced to something. You can't get any lower than that. And when you realize you're somewhere you can't get any lower, then it brings you a kind of humility that you understand that you're not that special. You're a sinner. And you need help. You need serious help. And there's only one person who can help you, and that's Christ. So that's a good place to be for sure. So I understood all of that. But with Mary, I always had, there was always this kind of a distance. I could never really make that connection. Just a few days ago, I was on a plane. I can't remember where I was going or from where I was going, but I was on a plane. And I pray a lot when I'm on a plane because, let's face it, you're basically in heavens, right? You're out there. The clouds are there. It's very nice. Try it. Just looking out of the window of the plane, the clouds were pink, and I can go on and on. And then I decided to pray to Mary. So I was saying a Hail Mary, and then we got into really serious turbulence. Serious. It was going, bouncing up and down. So of course, it is scary. So I felt afraid, as I said, I thought this might be my last Hail Mary ever. So I'm saying my Hail Marys, really fast too, like it's as if you say it fast, it's gonna work better. And so I'm saying my Hail Marys like furiously. And then suddenly there was this sound, there was this voice that said, Marina, pray, but say it without fear. Why are you afraid? And suddenly it all made sense. I said, yeah, that's the problem. Fear. Fear is the strongest human emotion. Fear holds us captive. It holds us down. The moment you can drop it, which takes a lot of work and a lot of determination, that is when you soar. That is when you're absolutely free. That is when nothing can ever hold you down or stop you from doing what you believe in. So again, I apologize for going on for so long. I can go on for hours, but I'm not going to do that to you. I have written 2 books. The details are there. So thank you. Now we are going to get into Q&A, and I would love to hear from you. There are going to be mics, I told. I don't have my glasses on, so I'm blind as a bat. But I was told that Chris is here, that you can ask some questions.
Wow, thank you, Marina, for that powerful message. We do have 3 roving microphones. We will do our best to come to you, and we do ask you to wait for a microphone and state your question. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. We've got one in front.
Is it okay? All right. Basically, you were just sharing, and thank you for your testimony. It was very moving. I just want to ask the question, you were talking about how that sometimes we don't really learn from past examples historically when you were dealing with that revolution in Iran. So how could you speak to us on maybe how you see it through your lens of what can we do today to better approach those types of situations from an American perspective? The lessons that we can learn.
Yeah, I get it. That is a 2-hour lecture on its own, but, just to kind of touch upon it, basically, I guess the real question, the practice, because, to learn a lesson is just an idea, but how do we in all practicality learn? Yes, of course, to sit down and to teach history properly, that would definitely be a step in the right direction. To discuss what these events, what revolutions really mean, and to understand their historical and political and religious background and aspects and all of that. But that would take generations. I mean, we would have to work on it in a very systematic and educational manner because it can only be achieved through education. So education is the key word for me. We live in a global village now. I'm sure that children here in the US, they study the history of the United States, but how much do they study about the world, about the Middle East, about South America? I mean, people even have difficulty pronouncing the words, the names from the Middle East, because they are hard to pronounce. Imagine if we have difficulty in the West, people have difficulty in the West pronouncing the names, then imagine how difficult it is to understand the huge cultural and religious and historical background that goes back thousands of years, and all of the conflicts that create the culture of the Middle East, how difficult that is. It's still doable, but I think it will take a long time. But before that, I think something that we can do a little bit more immediately and quickly is when it comes to, I guess, foreign policy, because we have the same discussion in Canada, and I think it's a good discussion to have here in the US. The US have had some really bad foreign policy, at least in Iran, I can say for sure. In 1953, we had the democratically elected government of Mohammad Mossadegh, our very first democratically elected government, and the CIA staged a coup against it because Mossadegh wanted to nationalize the oil and the US wanted cheap oil. So every nation is after its own interests. I think we would be naive to think otherwise. But at the same time, I think it is very important that we send a message to our politicians that morality, human values, human dignity, and human rights should be on top of priorities before cheap oil. Now, how achievable is that? I really don't know, because human nature is difficult and it's complicated. But I think the more of us send that message to our politicians, the more effective it is going to be. So we need to put morality back into government. We need to put morality back into foreign policy. I mean, there are certain things that are wrong no matter what. No matter what the reasoning behind it is, killing is wrong, torture is wrong. Once we justify the wrong, we are doing evil, whether we like it or not. We are empowering evil, and 30, 40, 50 years down the road, it is going to come and bite us in the back. It might work for a little while, but evil usually always leads to evil. So a bad foreign policy now is going to make us and our children pay dearly. You know, we saw it with the Taliban in Afghanistan, that US poured money into it, and look at where it got us. I mean, it became a monster. You know, we pour weapons and money into these areas that we don't understand, and then it becomes a disaster. So we need to think twice about that. Okay.
Hi, I'm Paola Bautista from Venezuela.
Hi.
Hi. And as you may know, the Bolivarian Revolution is close to Ahmadinejad and his way of doing and conceiving politics. I would like an advice for a little group of young Venezuelan people that are here and resisting that regime, to how to keep the faith and the hope and how to resist that kind of evil. Thank you.
Oh goodness, my heart goes to you. You know, we are basically in the same boat right now in Iran. You know, basically I'm gonna tell you to do what I'm doing. You know, I'm not gonna tell you to do something that I'm not doing myself. I don't believe in preaching without living it. Basically, it got to the point in my own life that when I looked around me, I decided that I need to take a stand. And to take a stand puts my life in danger. To take a stand means every time I get into my car, I expect it to blow up. Every time I step out into a dark parking lot, I say my final prayers. And I expect somebody to come out of the shadows and kill me. Every time one of my friends, I can't go back to Iran, they were certainly chopped into tiny little pieces upon arrival, but every time one of my friends goes back to Iran to visit his or her family, I think, you know what, if they take him hostage, I will have to go back, I will have to give myself up. And I'm prepared for that, that's just fine. You know, we have to get to the point that we decide this is a point of no return. We get to the point that we decide, you know, we have paid too much and we are not ready to give up any more of our humanity, of our dignity, of our values. Stand up. Don't go silently into the night, because the more silent you are, the more you allow them to take from you today, the worse it's going to get in the long run. And then it's going to become very difficult to get out. So don't waste time. Stand up for what is right. Stand up for what you believe in, but please do it in a non-violent way. I was so impressed a few days ago in Turkey. There was this man, this artist, who decided just to do a stand protest. Just standing there. Just stand. And the greater the numbers are, the greater the possibility of success will be. You know, we have to get to the point that we have to say, you know what, this is about more than just me. This is about doing what is right. This is about standing up for the truth. This is about standing up for human dignity. And if you are there, there is hope. So I really encourage you to stand up and use your voice.
Thank you for
the microphone. You know, I wish I could, but the mic is there. Maybe then they can come here. Yeah.
Thank you very much. When you were in prison and you were forced to give up your faith, your Christianity, can you give us a glimpse as to what your conversation was with God when you went through that?
Yeah, absolutely. When they told me that I had to convert, I had to basically put it on a scale. I had to say, okay, if I say, and they expected me to do it in public. So basically they took me out in front of the population of the prison, basically, and they had gathered, not everybody, but they had gathered a large group. There was this big area, and they had gathered people. And I was expected to go up on the podium and say just a very simple sentence: there is no God except Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet. So that was basically my way of converting to Islam. So when I was going up, I had my last minute conversation with God, and I said, God, you know what? I have a choice here. I mean, I either have to say that I don't know you, and you know that I do. So basically, I would be lying, and I hope you forgive me for this really big fat lie, but I have to do it because I need to save my parents. And it's easier for me to live with a lie than to live with the blood of my parents on my hands. So I have to make a choice. Do I lie to God, who is all-seeing and can see what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, or do I allow my parents to be executed or, heaven knows, tortured or whatever? So I'm making a choice, and I'm taking responsibility for it. And for a moment there, I expected God to get really angry. You know, I expected like a bolt of lightning to come and hit me in the head. But nothing happened. The birds kept on chirping, the sun kept on shining, the trees were as beautiful as ever, and nothing happened. And I went through with it. And now, years later, when I look back, to be honest with you, if I'm put in the same situation, knowing what I knew back then, I would most probably do the same. I would save lives. And I would trust God's forgiveness. And I would know that He would forgive me. And I have every faith that He has, because I'm the sinner and He's perfect. So why wouldn't He forgive me? Okay, and I think there was somebody in the front here, this lady here. Where's the mic? Over there.
My name is Maria Isabel. I'm from Colombia. And as many of you may know, my country is going through a peace process now. And your story is very interesting for me because victims in my country are many. I'm going to cry, I don't know why, but
Oh, that's okay.
for
It's okay.
more than 50 years, people have been dying.
Yeah.
And what I want to know is, how have you made yourself being able to forgive and go on?
Okay.
Because for the mothers in my country,
Yep.
I think that's the hard part.
Yeah.
And as young people, we don't know how to do that.
Yeah. Well, you know what, sweetheart, to me, it is really simple. What are the options? Okay, let's think about what choices you and I have. They have killed my best friends. And right now, as I say my best friends, I can see their faces standing in the background, and they are all smiling. They are all happy and joyful. When I look in their faces, I don't see any sadness in any of them. I am doing this for them, but they are worried for me. And what choices do I have? I have two choices here, really. One is to be angry and unforgiving. But what does that mean? To be angry and unforgiving means I would be trapped in those dark places. Have you ever been, what is it that you feel right now? Do you feel anger? Do you feel hatred? Sadness, yes, I feel sadness too. But sadness is okay. Do you know why? Because when Jesus was on the cross, He was very sad. But He went through that sadness and He came out of the other end. And that is where I keep looking. I see Him on the cross, but I know that He comes out of the other end. On the cross, He said something that I didn't understand before I went to prison. He said, Ili, Ili, lamma sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? I never understood that, because why would God say, why has God forsaken me? It didn't make sense. I thought, that's bizarre. Why would He say that? I don't get it. And then when I was in solitary confinement and I thought about it, what was hardest for me was not the fact that I could be executed any minute. What was hardest for me was that I had been abandoned by the world, that the world didn't give a damn. And that didn't cause me anger, it caused me sadness. Anger is an explosive emotion, but then it frizzles, and then it leaves this extensive sense of sadness. But the only thing that can lift, that has been ever able to lift my sadness, is Christ. Because I look at him. And I know he got out of the other end. And I want to be free to join him. And the only way I can be free is to decide to put down, if I ever feel angry, which we do feel angry. I have felt angry, I'm not saying I never have. But when I feel angry, I go in the bathroom and I lock the door behind me and I scream. Scream on top of my lungs. And then I'm still alive. My life means something. My life is a gift from God, and I have to use it to create something beautiful out of something ugly. The death of your people in Colombia is an ugly thing. The death of my people in Iran is an ugly thing. We can't change that. These people have died. They're gone. They are on the other side. We can't change that. Now, we miss them. We are upset. We are all of that. But what can we do? Like, I mean, in all practicality, what can you and I actually do about it? We can go kill some other people. But is that going to help anything? Is that going to make me feel better? No. Definitely it's going to make me feel worse. So I don't want to go there. I want to feel better. The only way I can feel better is if I can take that ugliness and turn it into something beautiful. A miracle. I can perform miracles, and so can you, and so can everybody in this room. If we decide to take something ugly and turn it into the most beautiful thing in the world. And why is it that we can do that? Because Christ did, and we can follow him. We can follow in his footsteps and do exactly as he did. His grace will allow us to take the death of my friend Shahnoush Behzadi. I can take her death and turn it into something amazing and beautiful, which is forgiveness, which is striving for a better Iran, which is fighting and standing up for a better future, not only for my people, but for yours as well. Because if we give in to the cycle of violence, it's just going to take more victims. That is not going to improve my life, and that's not going to improve yours. I want things to get better. So if we really want things to get better, we only have one way to go. And when I talk about forgiveness, now we need to know what it means. Forgiveness, we forgive the individuals who commit these crimes. That means that I don't want them to suffer. I don't want them to be tortured. I don't want them to be executed. No, not at all. I would like them to be educated, but that's a different story. But let's think about it, you know. So what is it, forgiveness? But can we ever forgive a system that creates torturers? No. The system needs to be changed. And this is where all that innocent blood can be used to save lives. You know, that's bizarre. But it can be done. We can use those lives to destroy the system, the evil system that kills. Does it make sense? Okay, good. Okay, do we have time for any more? Okay. Where? I can see.
Yes, I was wondering, you were mentioning something, you mentioned the silent majority.
Yeah.
And how that can have a tendency to empower or be complicit in some of these violences that you're speaking about. Speaking about so well. Thank you for this. But what I'm wondering about is that, you know, there is a lot of violence, especially against Christians, our fellow Christians, and even, well, our fellow human beings in the Middle East and throughout the Middle East in places like Egypt and now in Syria, with arms funded by U.S. government.
Yeah.
And I very rarely hear about this. I very rarely hear this publicly prayed about, specifically or named as something to pray about by any, well, Roman Catholic priests or for that matter, any other Christian leaders. So I'm wondering to what extent we should feel a responsibility as lay people to encourage our leaders to pray about these things specifically and name them, and to what extent we can expect that to be a leadership responsibility for our pastors and priests and bishops and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Now, I'm sure you have heard the phrase, ask and you shall receive. You know, it's very well said, actually. Ask and you shall receive. I mean, we just sit here and expect our politicians or our leaders, whether religious or not, to do the right thing. I mean, how on earth can that happen? We need to ask. We need to bring it up. This is what I was doing in Geneva. This is what I was doing in Madrid. Before that, this is what I was doing in London. Before that, I was doing it in Paris. Before that, I was doing it in Nice, and etc., etc. Basically, we have to get our voices heard. You have to write to your leaders, you have to call your leaders, and you have to ask them to value human life. And if there is human life being taken anywhere in the world, actually the church in Canada, it has been very vocal. The Catholic Church has been very outspoken about the killing and the imprisonment of Christians and all these other horrible things that has happened to Christians in the Middle East. But it's not only Christians. There's also the Baha'i. There's also the Zoroastrians. I mean, they're all over. There are also, you know, all sorts of people being discriminated against. And I feel that when people are dying in Colombia, or I feel that when people are dying in Iran, or when people are dying in Syria, it is my responsibility. It is my business, mea culpa. It is my duty to stand up for them because they are not in a situation where they can really do anything about it. But we here, we have a voice, but we are so busy with our lives and with the price of gas. And, you know, I'm not downplaying any of those, but let's face it, people are dying and we are consumed by our little problems. I mean, it's greed, it's human narrow-mindedness, it's selfishness, it's evil. So I think it comes down to every single one of us to stand up and to say no, that there is a right and there is a wrong, and you cannot fix a war in Syria by throwing weapons at them. I mean, it's like putting a huge amount of gasoline on a fire. That's just downright stupid. So there are better ways of doing things, and we have to demand our politicians because they do what we really put pressure on them to do. We don't put pressure on them, they are not going to do anything about it. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't even be blaming the politicians, I would be blaming every single one of us. I would be blaming myself. It is my fault that people are dying in Syria. I have to do better than this. I can do better than this. It is my responsibility. I'm going to sleep less and I'm going to work harder. You know, it starts from you. It starts from me. Stop worrying about Obama. I may put pressure on him, but at the end of the day, it is you and me that can make a difference. And we keep on forgetting that. We keep on throwing all the responsibility on the shoulders of the politician. I mean, they have become our scapegoats. Let's stand up and do something about it. Then the world will become a better place. Okay, last one. Where is it?
Thank you, ma'am. Revolution is not a means, is not an end in itself, but a means towards establishing and sustaining a free society.
Mm-hmm.
How do you suggest that a revolution is designed to achieve that purpose, so that it is not hijacked by certain elements who only initiate more and more revolutions?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. That's a very good question. You know, there's a problem here, though. The way you were asking your question, which is quite normal, actually, is to believe that revolution is the miracle cure. A revolution is not a miracle cure at all. A revolution is only an explosion of a situation that could not be contained anymore. So a situation cannot be contained. It it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it gets to the point that according to the laws of physics or sociology or whatever, it explodes. Revolution is not a cure for anything. Revolution is actually a devastating event. It's usually a bloody event. It's usually a really messy event. What is really important is what comes after the revolution. That is the key. Now, after any revolution, look at the French Revolution, one of the most successful ones, if we think it took forever, but I mean one of the most successful ones. But even look at that. It was like back and forth, and people's heads were being chopped off, and wars were being waged, and innocent. So any revolution, when it happens after it, let's not have any wishful thinking here. There is going to be blood, there is going to be ugliness, there is going to be political groups that want to hijack it. The only way for a revolution to go the right way is for the average citizen to be involved and to stay involved and to stand up and get their voices heard and never ever settle. That is the only way. Now, it has been done. Against the French Revolution showed us that it can be done, but it takes time. Again, this is democracy, is not an event. It is a process. And when I talk about the process, it can take 120 years. So we have to be patient with it. Unfortunately, in the West, we have a culture of instant gratification. I mean, we want to go in with our army and our bombs and our drones and et cetera, and we want to fix that thing by tomorrow. I don't think so. It takes patience. It takes forgiveness. It takes the silent majority not to be silent and stand up and speak for themselves. That is what it takes, and it takes 120 years. So we have to be ready to carry on that fight for 120 years. If we are not ready for that, another group of dictators will come into power and will hijack it, and then we have to start from scratch. So it will happen over and over and over again until we get it right. But I do have faith in human nature. I do have faith in human beings that with the grace of God, if we keep in mind that what is right and what is wrong, we are eventually going to get it relatively right. And as it was said this morning, there's no such thing as a perfect society. So as long as things get better, as long as things improve, we should be happy, and we should be working for change, toward change, while we are being patient with it. There is no instant, immediate recipe for this situation. It takes a lot of hard work, it takes a lot of heartache, it takes a lot of suffering, and we have to stand by it, because that is what we are called to do, to love our neighbor. And love is not an easy act. You know better than I do probably that love is patient. Thank you so much.